everyone, Ryan here with RDM, and we're going to give a motorized bicycle update. We're going to talk about that most recent video where my Piaggio bike was ripping up and down with the centrifugal max torque clutch and the pull start. I know a lot of people aren't very familiar with that, so we're going to talk about that, explain what it is, and we'll do a little deep dive on that whole situation. We're going to talk about the crankshafts. I know there's a lot of people waiting on crankshafts, and the pre-sale's still up. And yeah, we got a lot to talk about the crankshafts. It all ties together with everything. And the final thing, the big thing I'm most excited about and I want to talk about is that V-twin. And I know nobody knows anything about it because I never talked about it. I just put some vague pictures that aren't very completed, and yeah, so I want to talk about that. We'll get to that. It all ties together. The place to begin is that latest video. We'll start with the specs. Well, anyways, I posted the video a few days ago. I don't know if anybody missed it, or you know, go into the group and search my name and you'll find the video. It's not a very good video, but it does demonstrate the basic function of that type of setup, and it shows the bike does go pretty good. It's not the fastest bike, but it might be. It could be. By the specs, it shouldn't be the fastest, but it still could be. So that's a 40-stroke Piaggio. That's not the classic 44.5 or 45-stroke. That's why it's using the stock head, the small head. And I know somebody was asking in the comments, does that keep the engine cool enough? And I mean, it's kind of it depends how you ask the question. In a race, I think it would probably work in a race, but you'd be pushing max temp and maybe overheating by the end of the race. It depends on the track. If you were going to be trying to hold top speed and go for a long period of time, a long distance, it would probably overheat. But for just testing and, you know, working on my skills and doing quick little laps in the parking lot, it works well. You can probably see from the video, the bike gets faster and faster as it gets hotter and hotter. That's typical with these Piaggios, is they like heat. They don't like being fully cold, but they still run good no matter what. Yeah, so then there's a lot to talk about, like my impression of that setup. A lot of people are familiar with that setup if they're coming from GoPeds or you know, mopeds. A lot of them have that type of setup, just a centrifugal clutch. A lot of the 212 mini bike guys, you know, it's you just hit the gas and it goes. And some of the things I'm about to talk about are going to seem real familiar if you are familiar with that type of system, which is a centrifugal clutch. I went from the $20 Amazon clutch, and, you know, I'm sure everybody's seen them, and that engaged about 1,800 RPMs to a max torque set up to engage at 2,800, so an extra 1,000 RPM. My engine has something unique to these type of drivetrain systems, which is it has a primary drive. The primary drive is the chain drive. Normally, our engine's primary drive would be that gear drive. The gear drive is about a 4-to-1 ratio, roughly, and my chain drive, because the limitations of chain drives, is about 2-to-1. Now, if I wanted to work around that limitation and increase the gear reduction with the chain drive, I suppose I can up it a little bit, but what I would start doing is risking having the small sprocket skip teeth, or I would have to increase the center to center distance of the sprockets. Neither of them are ideal, so we're kind of stuck to 2-to-1. With the 2-to-1, it works great though, as far as the clutch thinks it's a a 212 engine. You know, it takes the reviness of the extremely high RPM of the two-stroke Piaggio, and it cuts it in half. So it then starts to pretty much match a well-built 212 engine, and that's what it feels like when you hit the gas. It's great. The one thing is the primary drive chain is very, very short, and it's not an oil bath, it's out in the open, so you have to keep it oiled pretty often. So for race applications, it's no problem at all. But I did notice, you know, I've been testing these out for about a year now. If you're going to daily drive this thing and you're going to put a lot of hours on it, the chain, it does wear out in about like 2 months of heavy use. And if you forget to oil it, you can actually get the chain to overheat. Because it's so short, it goes around those bends very many times a second. And because it is the primary drive, it is on a higher speed circuit than the chain that would go to the rear wheel. So it moves faster and it circulates faster. It's also, you know, according to the engineering handbooks and all that, it's slightly past what the chain is rated for, so we are abusing the chain. Not ideal. The way to get around that would be to increase the tooth count on both sprockets, the front and back. That's where we're really crossing the line. It's not necessarily the horsepower or the RPM, although we are with RPM. It's it's how small that front drive sprocket is. So it's not a perfect setup on paper. It does work, and it's as simple as that. And it does prove that this type of drive chain can work with our two-stroke engines. And now let's talk about how it applies to racing. And then I want to talk about how it applies to racing, and I want to also talk about how, well, I'm going a little fast here. Slow down. This freaking cat too. We're going to also talk about how these engines apply to if you're going to daily drive in and ride it on the road. And yeah, that's really where this is going to get interesting. So on the racetrack, it turns out there's about 2 straights, and you're not on the straights, you know, not even a fifth of the time you're racing. Most of the time you're leaned over and you're bent over in a turn, and the turns, some of them get really tight and slow you down a lot. You have to really scrub off almost all your speed and then hit the gas and get out of there again. So it turns out that where you gain the most is when you hit the gas going from a low speed coming out of a turn. You want to really, really quickly get up to not necessarily full speed, because before you know it, another turn's coming up. You're not really getting to full speed, except for on the 2 straights. But you really just want that mid-range grunt to just like kind of blurp you forward. And unfortunately, a lot of times with our 2-stroke engines, that zone lines up perfectly with right below where the pipe is. So that pre-pipe staging kind of chokes you up. Now, we've done a lot of work with the Piaggios. We sacrificed a lot of peak horsepower to kind of make it so that before the pipe weird section is minimized, or even like erased pretty much on these Piaggios. And we do that with lower timing, with the oval exhaust port. And then on my race engines, what I like to do is I like to take sandpaper and pull like a band like this and put it through the exhaust port, and you know, have it angled upward towards where the cylinder head would go, and I just like to pull it a bunch of times, and basically in the middle top lip of the exhaust port put a little radius. And what that does is it kind of kills the peak power. It makes it so the pipe hit isn't as sharp, isn't as impressive. But what it does in return is it spreads all of that power that you're scrubbing off and it spreads it everywhere where it would have been missing. That's probably like an oversimplification, but that seems to be the case. That with a low timing and a pretty much square engine, which isn't that common in our hobby, since we're mostly working with big bore kits. It works. But there's another way around it, and that would be this clutch. And if you had, let's say we put a bully clutch on this, because I noticed with the higher stall clutch, it gets better and better. It gets faster and faster as far as how hard it pulls when the clutch is in slip mode. Because with centrifugal clutch, there's two modes. There's slip mode, and then there's lock mode. And you can make it so the lock mode is only at the very, very end of your, RPM range. That's how you get the most acceleration. There's some downsides with that, but they don't actually apply at all when it comes to racing, unless you are putting down too much power coming out of these turns. Which we have small engines, we don't really have that problem. It would be nice if we did. So, long story short, on the racetrack, a centrifugal clutch, especially like a bully, that's the winning formula. And especially if you, in theory, not that I've done it or tried it, but in theory we can go back to building these two-stroke engines to the book and go back to like triple exhaust ports and, maxed out race setup. We're going to have that dip of power right before the pipe hits. But if we set the clutch to have a stall speed above that dip in power, in theory, on paper, that's the most power you can put down. That's the fastest bike you can build with a two-stroke. So I think and you kind of seen that from the video. That doesn't look like a 40-stroke, a 40 by 47 build. That seems like something special, and it kind of is. But a lot of it is that clutch. So now we're going to talk about the downsides, and this will actually lead into that V-twin engine. So the downsides are, if you want to ride a bike everywhere and you want to, use it as a daily driver, with these race engines, they can do it, but we then have an issue. Because we went to such high RPM and the higher stall clutch and just the nature of these engines, they're really ferocious and they're really, really powerful. They're not really very practical for street use. You have to be a very disciplined driver, a very experienced driver. And you have to change the gearing. Like, you can't use race gearing on the street. You can, but it's actually like pretty much reckless. Like, literally, even if you try to drive carefully, it just accelerates so hard and it screams so loud. It's pretty reckless. And to me, that kind of loses some of the magic. It loses some of the nature of this hobby because, I like driving them on the street. I like commuting with it. Now that I moved the shop to a more clean-cut neighborhood, and I'm out of, I was in a pretty rough neighborhood, the shop and where I was living before, it's more of a frowned upon thing again. In the rougher neighborhoods, you can drive whatever you want. They don't care. And even the race engines, but that's not most of America. Most of America, these race engines are not meant to be on the road. They're not appreciated in any way. It's reckless, and you deserve a ticket if you're doing it. At the same time, I think there is room for these bikes on the road, and I've owned in my family, we've had electric bikes. I've enjoyed electric bikes, and I've been pleasantly surprised by the performance of electric bikes. They're great. And I was actually, many of you may remember, I was looking to invest in expanding into electric bikes and really, seeing what we can do with it. And I still may. But they have some safety issues. And there's a lot of money involved in just the batteries, and I'm not ready to lay all that money out. I'm not built for that kind of thing where I'm just buying tens of thousands of dollars worth of batteries and divvying it up, and they're a fire hazard. They scare me, and I'd be afraid for my customers. I thought about how can I make these safe, and I didn't come up with any good answers or cheap answers. They're not safe. I'd rather take my chances with gas. And then we're back to the other problem with the gas. These race engines are a little bit too harsh. They're too loud. They're way too powerful. Like way over twice or three times as powerful as they need to be or should be to be on the street. When you're on a racetrack and you have a race helmet, gloves, motorcycle jacket, there's a paramedic nearby, there's insurance available, and people looking out for you, so you're not going to just be on the side of the road and found the next morning or something. It's a different situation, and then it's fun to have 3 times as much power. We're on a closed track and there's no cars going by that aren't going to realize a bicycle is going to come up on beside them at 55 miles an hour. So they're amazing on the racetrack, but we have issues. They're not good for the core hobbies, mission statement, which is getting people back and forth to work, taking pleasure cruises, maybe converting your household to be a 1-car household or a no-car household instead of maintaining these expensive vehicles and insurance and all that. It might not be worth it to some people. And I kind of like, for me, the racing's in California. I'm on the East Coast. I like driving them on the road. I want to go back to that. They're also, these race engines, there's no way to make them quiet. You can do everything you want to do. You can put a big airbox on it, a big muffler. It's gonna scream. It's gonna completely go berserk. There's no way to make it quiet. The vibrations, they're pretty. It's tolerable. If it was just the vibrations, I think we would manage. We would find a way. We'd make the bike heavier, and the weight of the bike would suck up some of the vibration. But otherwise, the noise and all that, and the power, really. So in addition to all that, what I'm saying, I've talked to, maybe besides me, 3 of the main influencers in this hobby about this very issue, and most of these guys have heavy influence on the China side, the China manufacturing, and really great people. And luckily we have a really good, open, honest conversation. We talk to each other and we tell each other the truth and we try to all make sure that the health of the hobby is maintained. And essentially everybody is worried that these engines are so powerful, they're so ferocious, that it's going to be the catalyst that rolls in regulation, and worst case, shuts down the ability for China to import these engines into America. And any country, even just one country going down, could be a big loss for China. And we definitely appreciate what they do for us. We wouldn't have these motors if it wasn't for them. So we definitely don't want anything like that to happen. So, my next natural step would be to either keep developing these motors, try to bring down the costs on them, or increase the horsepower, add cylinders, make it a 2-cylinder, work on the clutch. It never ends. I could just keep going and going, and that's what I do. I always maintain a pretty hefty R&D budget, and I do a lot to just keep pushing forward. And that's been the case. I have 3 or 4 complete designs that are all different for a more powerful version, a more refined version of this 2-stroke. And they can have multiple cylinders. They could have a different primary drive, a different clutch, a different ignition. I even have ones that use a different crankshaft, have balance shafts. But again, talking to these guys that have a lot of influence, you know, 3 different guys, it's all we're all saying the same thing, and I'm saying the same thing too. You know, these things have a little bit too much power. They just do, and it's scary. It's scary for everybody involved in this hobby. You know, it's fun on the racetrack, but otherwise, I don't feel comfortable just going all out like I have been developing them. And there's another push too. I don't know all the reasons behind it, but you know, the 4-strokes are interesting, and some guys are switching to the 4-strokes and electric. It's like the people that get scared of the 2-stroke or get a bad taste in their mouth for whatever reason, they seem to start going towards the 4-stroke. So I've done a deep dive. I've always been a 4-stroke guy, and I've had the 212s back when they were the GX200 clones. This was back in like 2005. We got them. We put the Comet CVT on it, and what a great drivetrain. And I always had one major complaint with them though, and I still do. I don't like the packaging. I think they're too wide to fit on a bicycle. I know others feel the same way. They're also heavy. Without a clutch, it's 40 full pounds. That's more than double what our engine weighs, and our engine has a clutch and a primary drive in it. They don't have a primary drive, and when you do get a primary drive, they're a known weak point of the build. When you have a 212 build on a bike, that jack shaft, it's going to need maintenance. You're going to have to adjust the chain length. The bearings are prone to go bad. And it's a source of noise too. It also makes the bike wider, and it can chew up your pants. There's also a significant cost involved with buying the jack shaft, and it's necessary. We need a primary drive. For a 2-stroke, you need a primary drive of about 4-to-1, and for a 4-stroke, you can get by with like a 2-to-1. And the other alternative is to put a sprocket that is roughly 50% the diameter of your rear wheel, which is pretty large. And that's essentially what I did with my 2-stroke by putting that 96 tooth on. And the reason I did that is because I have a high revving 2-stroke, and I only went a 2-to-1 primary drive. So my clutch is still spinning at 8,000 RPM. That's like a built 4-stroke. So to have race-ready gearing, I needed a jack shaft or a really big rear sprocket. I went the really big rear sprocket route. So that's the thing with the 4-strokes. And then I also think that the 212s have too much power for a bicycle. I don't like that. I don't like 40 pounds. I think that's way too heavy. Like way too heavy. So then I really looked into, and I love these little 4-stroke weed trimmers. And then I like the heavier duty version. They call them the GX50H or the 140F or the 142, 144F. Those engines are really cool. And they're still like 50, 53cc, about 2.5 horsepower. Really, really cool engines. And but they all have the small 4-strokes, they have one major issue. They're not super heavy, but they all have, well, they rev pretty high, so they're going like 8,000 RPM. The problem with them is they have a clutch mounted on the crankshaft directly, so the clutch spins pretty quickly, and it spins pretty fast, like a well built 212. And what ends up happening is this small, lightweight little 50cc or 53cc 4-stroke engine ends up being 10, 11 inches wide from pull start to the end of the primary drive housing. And it's just like the way they do the clutch. Everything has to stack lengthwise. You know, the clutch has to go at the very end on the tip of the crankshaft, and then you could have to put the clutch bell, and then the clutch bell has to have a support bearing, and then on top of that support bearing, then it has to have a primary drive gear or belt roller. Sometimes you can put the bearing underneath that belt roller or chain drive, but then you run into another issue trying to make that bearing compact. That bearing becomes a weak point and you'll have reliability issues. So it's tough. Those small little engines, how cute, I love them, but their primary drive, it just kills the whole deal. They're so bad, it almost makes it worth it to go friction drive and just have a roller rolling against your tire, because at least it makes your build a little bit narrower and you won't have all those weak points. But you don't want a friction drive. It screws up the tire. I don't recommend, and you have to have your engine hanging off to the side of your tire, so your bike's gonna have a weird balance. It's gonna, on the kickstand, it's gonna want to fall over a lot of times. So the small ones, at least they're not too heavy. They have a primary drive issue. The 212, there's nothing you can do to make them lighter. So and they're also too fast. It goes back to the original issue with the two strokes: too powerful, too heavy, too wide. So our two strokes, when they're built and you have like a nice clutch on it, and you have, maybe it's the billet engine has a little bit wider ignition cover, and my extended clutch shaft, which makes everything another 1/4 inch wider, you're somewhere in the ballpark of 6 inches wide. Now a 212 engine, you're starting at 12 inches, and then it goes from there. It goes up from there, which is ridiculous. A foot wide that you have to fit in between your pedal cranks. The small engines, these GX50 things, as far as I know, nobody's making anything that starts below 9 inches. And I would be actually shocked if the one that all said and done is below 9 inches. So yeah, they're also pretty wide. You need a wide pedal kit or reach your legs around. Also, they're 2 horsepower, 2.5 horsepower. They don't have almost any performance aftermarket, and they're not like a 2-stroke where you can put a Minarelli kit and triple, quadruple, 4 or 5 times the power. That's not the case with these. I don't really think that you're realistically gonna double the power that easily. It'll be, I think. All right. Sorry, I had to clear the memory on my phone so I could take some more video. So we left off with how the 4-strokes, the small ones, they don't get built up like the 2-strokes. You can't turn it from 2 horsepower to 12 or 8 or even 6. Maybe you can get to 4. Let's say you can get to 3. Even 3 is not really enough. 4 would be good. 5 would be good. And that's what I think for daily commuting, or something that you're going to spend some money on and really, take some pride in. And, I'm thinking like final solution kind of stuff. Not just, I'm never happy with the status quo. There's always something that can be done. So with the 4-strokes, we've come to the conclusion that they are either too heavy and too powerful, or they're a good weight, but they're too wide and they're not powerful enough. So that's why, I've designed many engines, most of them 2-stroke, some of them 4-stroke, trying to see where I want to branch out and take this hobby into a new direction, solve some new issues. Because making 2-strokes fast, I mean, we went above and beyond there. We went too far, I think. So the new goal is to put the research and development efforts of RDM towards an engine platform that doesn't have this noise, vibration, harshness problem, that isn't overly powerful, that doesn't weigh too much, and that is not too wide, because that seems to be an issue. It's too wide. We also want to have it so that it has a predictable maintenance schedule, and that it's going to be easy to support, and that somebody could maintain and support this engine on their own without me for a lifetime. I want to build these engines to last a lifetime. You know, you may have to do rebuilds, but I want to make it so you can do rebuilds. You can get every part. And this 4-stroke V-twin, I have really basic drawings up. They're not final. The V angle might change. I know it looks a little funny right now. Right now we're at 120 degrees. But it might tighten up. It might go towards 90, maybe 100. But that uses two GX50 engines. And it combines them together on a central crank. The crank is going to be a special in-house product. And it's going to be interesting. It all will work. They're overhead cam engines. The engines with the gas tank, the exhaust, the fan shroud, ignition, everything in a clutch weighs under 10 pounds from the factory. So we're going to put two of these engines together. We're going to use one flywheel and one crankshaft. The crankshaft will be heavier. And we're going to have a primary drive built in. So the goal is to have an engine that is somewhere in the ballpark of 20 pounds. And that would bring it in line with a billet 2-stroke engine. Also, if we do not run a pull starter, it looks like we're going to be in the ballpark of about 6.5 inches wide. So as far as width goes, excellent. We're right there, right where we need to be. Now, as far as power, the GX50 is rated at roughly 2 horsepower. It revs over 8,000 RPM. I think actually over 9,000. And we're going to add a little bit of stroke to each one, so we're going to be maybe as high as 60, 65 cc. It might only be only 55, you know. We're going to have some increased displacement for each cylinder because we are going to increase the stroke a little bit. So maybe we'll make a little over 2 horsepower per cylinder. So these engines should be out of the box about 4 horsepower or more. Now for primary drive, this is a 4-stroke engine, so it has an oil bath. I'm going to run off the crankshaft a chain gear reduction. It's looking like we're going to be somewhere in the 3-to-1 range. Now with the 3-to-1 range, the engine spins about 60%, if that, of what a built Piaggio, maybe about half of what a built Piaggio spins. So if I go to 3-to-1 reduction, that will make it so that we can both use a go-kart clutch and, you know, it'll stress out, it'll put a lot of torque through the clutch because we're going to be tripling the torque. But it'll work. And we should not need another jack shaft or any other reduction after that. You should be able to go right to the rear wheel and have a reasonable rear sprocket size. The primary drive, this chain drive, is going to be in the oil bath. It's going to share the same oil as the crankshaft. And it'll be a 35 chain, I think. I might go down to like an 8mm pitch chain, just a tiny bit smaller. And it's going to be great. Very good. The goal is to have the small sprocket be at least 13, 14 teeth. And that makes it so you don't have any, it's better to have the small sprocket be no smaller than 12, 13. Ideally even 14. So that limits our final reduction. I'm not going to go to 4-to-1. 3-to-1, I think, is the target. Maybe even like 2.8 or something like that. But we're going to have a chain and an oil bath. So the Achilles heel of these 4-stroke builds, the primary reduction drive, it's going to be an oil bath. That will make it more reliable. Very excited about that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run the heavier duty 212 style clutches. So it'll be a big heavy duty oversized clutch for this build, but it'll run at lower RPM. So that should make these clutches naturally, effectively engage at a higher RPM. So you won't need to buy a $300-400 clutch. Even with a $20-30 clutch, you'll have a higher stall speed and you'll have good acceleration. Now another big benefit, and no promises here, I mean I'm going to do the best I can, but it's going to be a work in progress. We should be able to achieve an almost unbeatable level of balance because we have a V configuration. And these other like secondary vibrations and all that, the vibrations that would be caused by the counterweight at 90 degrees will be effectively canceled out by another piston. So this should be the smoothest engine. In addition, by having 2 cylinders, it should keep the it should make it so that long story short, it should be a smooth engine. Because it's a 4-stroke with some smaller pistons, it should be quiet. And at least because it's a 4-stroke, we should at least have the option to make it quiet by putting on better mufflers. With a 2-stroke, you can put on any muffler you want, it's not going to get quiet. And if it does get quiet, you're not very powerful. That is with the 2 strokes. With the 4 strokes, we can actually, I think, make a quiet 4 or 5 horsepower. Now, I'm going to make these right away. I'm not exactly sure how people are going to take to these or what the demand's going to be. And the demand does affect the final price. If I'm going to be making only 5-10 a year, it costs a lot more to make them than if I'm going to be making 50 a year. That's just how it goes. So I'm going to need to gauge you guys and see how you guys are responding to this. The plan from the beginning is this. Make a limited number, at least 3, maybe as many as 10 to 12 max. They're going to be at a more premium price. They're going to cost a little more money, but you're going to get them soon. I'm going to have these built right away. You know, this first 3 to 12. And I might be picky with who I allow to buy them. I may allow everybody to buy them, but I may also give discounts to people who are trusted in the community, that have YouTube channels or post regularly on Facebook or are willing to. Or even people that you have a friend group where you have 3, 4, or 5 of you, and you're all enthusiasts, you all have motorized bikes, and you're willing to make videos and really test this motor out, and you really believe in this motor. Because these first 3 to 12 motors, it's critical that they all get put to the test. I want people that get these to immediately install them as quickly as they can, safely. But then really run them every day if they can. Try to break them. Try to overheat it. Try to do whatever you can to make it fail. Make something wear out. Make it make some sort of noise. And then what we're going to do is immediately take that data, that information, and take it to perfect another design. Or keep the design if nothing happens. And then we're going to move them on to production. And the goal is to, I'm going to be a little more flexible with having some of the parts be made by other shops. And I'm going to be putting a lot of the parts out to bid with really detailed drawings so they can't skimp on quality. And the name of the game with this engine is I want to go right to the bottom with price on it. Ideally, I think that it's possible to get these engines closer to the $500 to $700 range and not the $1,500 range. I think this first batch, You know, if I were really to try to charge the full price, you're looking at about $1,500. I might take a little bit of a personal loss in this first batch, especially if I get excited about who's looking to get them, and see if you can get them a little bit cheaper. Now, just a heads up for this first batch, the way I'm looking to structure it is I'm going to sell you a short block. So it's going to be the bottom half of the engine. It'll include the primary drive and the output for a clutch, maybe even include a clutch. But well, what you'll need to do is buy 2 GX50 engines or 2 GX50 clone engines, tear them all apart, and then slap them onto this short block to make your V-twin. And what that'll do is it'll make it so I don't have to go buy a bunch of these GX50 engines, because that would add up, and that I don't have the money to do that, to go buy, you know, a ton of GX50s right now. Also, I don't want to be responsible if I go and buy 20 GX50s and there's something wrong with them. You know, so you go and take the risk and see what happens. I will allow you to send them to me, and I'll take them apart and make sure everything's going to fit, so you have a guaranteed fit. So yeah, very excited about that. I want to move forward with that right away. I have some shipping to do. And now about the cranks. I already put out in the description of the other video. Yeah, the rods didn't come with the bearings. This is not the first time this has happened. I swear they do this on purpose. No big deal. But instead of just saying, hey, you forgot these bearings, just send me the bearings, or trying to just order the bearings, which would be a no-money deal for both of us. It's, you know, just such a small order. I want to commit to ordering some more rods for this V-twin engine, because it needs a custom crank with custom rods. So that's why I'm kind of rushing forward and pushing ahead right away this V-twin project. I want to bundle it in with these pre-sale cranks. I'm just also very excited about it. I want one for myself right away. I want to go back to ride these bikes all the time, and I have really high hopes for it. The clutch. Now, if we go with the Centrifugal go-kart clutch, not including the 3D clutch, we need to put the pull start on. Not the end of the world, but it adds another about 1.5 inches of width. Oh well. End game here is to have a manual clutch. The end game, actually, this might happen in a few years. I probably shouldn't say this, but where we're really going is I want to have a really well-made hydrodynamic torque converter, which is what a car has with an automatic transmission. It sloshes fluid around, and it makes extra torque at low RPM and acts like a gear reduction. So it's like you have a manual, you know, a gearbox. And then when everything's going well and there's not too much load on it, it'll actually almost get you to a 1-to-1, like a 0.9 to 1 ratio. So the engine's still going to spin a little bit faster, but it'll, you know, basically you have an automatic transmission that'll increase torque down low, and also it'll let you idle at a traffic light without shutting the engine off. Another fantastic feature. So that's the future. I want to go to a hydrodynamic clutch, but in addition to that, I want to have a manual clutch. So it'll make it kind of like a fully automatic transmission. And it'll be a bump start, so we don't have to have a pull start. You hit the clutch, it engages, and lets you start the engine. Then you let go of the clutch. I mean, it'll be a normally disengaged clutch. You hit the gas, it's like you have an automatic transmission. But then when you're going about full speed, you'll have like an overdrive option where if you hit the clutch again, it'll lock the clutch shaft together, and instead of being a 9-to-1, you know, a slight slip from the torque converter, you would then lock it together and get a little bit of a speed boost at top speed. I think that's an unbeatable combination. We don't have that. Nobody's done this before. It's, you know, and that I've been working with China. That has to be made in China, because if it was made here, the clutch alone would be over $1,000. So that's where we're going along. I mean, I'm working on it now, but yeah, I want to go 4-stroke and all that. We have some fun ideas. And with these 4-strokes, it is going to be forced air cooled. The ignition flywheel, it'll have fan blades that actually face inward. They face towards the engine. We won't have a shroud though. So these engines will be supplied without a shroud for now. I'll be looking to have options made, but I'll be able to supply files, and people will be able to 3D print them. They might not be able to 3D print it in one go, but maybe you can make it in 2 pieces and glue it together. But yeah, this will be a forced air-cooled engine. So that's another cool benefit. Also, the GX50 engine does not have adjustable timing. We'll have adjustable timing on this. So I'm just so excited. So here you can get excited with me. Imagine having a motorized bike engine that you can adjust the valves. Like they have the little set screw and all, just like on the 212, you can adjust your valves. It has a little camshaft. And I just think it's so cool doing oil changes and all that type of stuff. I'm thrilled. I think the 2-strokes, they're simple and that's really cool, but sometimes you want to actually have a valve cover to pop off and look at the contraption and all. I want more contraption, more complexity. I want it to be reliable still. And I think we're going to add reliability by having an oil bath on this engine. So, yeah, look out for that. I'm going to figure out how I want to list this and then put it up on the store. But that's the direction we're moving in. A V-twin 4-stroke. And yeah. If I can on this first design on these prototypes, if I can, I'm going to make it so that it comes out of the box with a manual clutch. Because I think that would actually be supreme if we kept that China Girl manual clutch going. And I minimum price again. You know, you can upgrade and put clutch plates on it. Just to let you know where my head's at. But if I run out of time designing this thing, what I'm going to do is go to an automatic clutch where it has just a 3/4 inch clutch output. And you go and put on a clutch like you would a Predator 212 engine. I think I covered everything. Yeah. I know you probably can't see anything, it's dark in this video, but yeah, enough. Alright, hope you enjoy. I'll be posting some pictures. Maybe I'll do some editing and throw some pictures in on this video so you're not just looking at a black face of a dark car, you know. Anyways, hope you enjoy it. Hope you guys are all getting excited about this 4-stroke build like I am. If anybody thinks that they're a good candidate to test this engine, start pleading your case. Let's put it that way. You know, and this could be good for other influencers. If somebody else wants to get some views, I have a feeling that this video might lend itself to creating really good content. So hopefully there's somebody else out there or multiple people out there that will get excited about a V-twin, lightweight, 20 horsepower, 20 pound, 5 horsepower, only 6-inch wide engine. You know, we don't need a crazy clown wide cranks. We don't need a whole bike that weighs over 120 pounds. I want to keep these bikes under 100 pounds. And we don't need rocket ship power because, you know, when I ride my 2-stroke engine, my race bike, I get shaky. I'm afraid of the bike. I'm going to be honest. That bike is terrifying. I want to go back to not being afraid to ride my bike. And I don't want to be putting people in danger. I know there's some young people in this community. Don't go jumping right into the fastest 2-stroke and then go riding on the street. There's some young guys that take these 2-strokes, the fastest 2-stroke on the track. Nothing wrong with that. But don't try to go as fast as it's possible to go on the street with a bicycle. So I think I'm circling back on some other things I talked about. So let's just end the video. Let's end it here. Looking forward to hear what you guys have to say about this. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks, everyone.